spectrum, because the time is very short, and we'll have to complete all the 2D NMR techniques where the students have it in the syllabus. I'll actually give the differences between the 1D and 2D NMR techniques. What is exactly a 1D and what is exactly a 2D NMR technique, and then how the 2D NMR spectrum or a technique is more useful in knowing the structures, and what are the different types of 2D NMR techniques. One second. One second. I'll just.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Mama, 100 వచ్చారా ఫస్ట్?
So I'll talk about the 2D NMR techniques. So before I talk about the 2D NMR techniques, what exactly is a 1D NMR, and then what are the differences between 1D and 2D, and then how we have to talk about what is the need for us to talk about the 2D NMR techniques, and what are the different kinds of 2D NMR, and how they are useful in knowing the structures of organic molecules. Especially, my emphasis will be on the structures of organic molecules. And now that we are talking about 2D NMR, what exactly is a 1D NMR? So all these days, what we are talking about proton, the P13 and nitrogen 14 or fluorine 19 or phosphorus 31 NMR, they're all conventional NMR, and we never thought that they are 1D. And now that we are talking about 2D NMR, they are nothing but 1D NMR. So what exactly is a 1D NMR? See, I'm showing in the slide, I'm just showing the 1D NMR spectrum, which is used to solve simple to moderate complex molecule structures of complex structures of organic molecules, where it is a plot of frequency versus intensity. So if you just look at the right side, the PMR spectrum of ethanol molecule is given. And ethanol, you all know it is CH3, CH2OH, where there are three different kinds of protons. One is three methyl, the other is methylene, and the other is hydroxyl. So you get basically you get three different signals. And the signals are split according to the neighborhood. So CH3 is split downfield, upfield as a triplet, because it has got two neighborhoods, that is methylene. And methylene is a downfield quartet because the environment is methyl. So it is seen as a quartet and hydroxyl. So now using this information, you can know there are three different kinds of proton and the environment, and based on that, you can deduce the structure of molecule, that is ethanol. And now, if so, why we are um, why we have to talk about the 2D NMR technique? So, if suppose the 1D NMR spectrum is giving us the information regarding the structure of the molecule, um, why do we have to go to the other techniques? So now the other example which I have given it here, shown in the slide, is 6-methyl progesterone with 24 different kinds of protons, where all the signals are getting overlapped. And in the previous spectrum, where ethanol molecule spectrum is given, the signals are well separated, whereas here the signals are getting overlapped. One reason is there are many number of non-equivalent protons, or many different kinds of protons, that is 24. And the other thing is close line chemical shift values. Because of this, the signals are getting overlapped, and this makes us difficult to analyze the structure of the molecule. So this makes the analysis complex. Now, don't we have any other solution to come out of this situation? Yes. There are two techniques or many techniques, and especially here, high resolution. In such cases, high resolution techniques and shift reagents will help us to resolve the spectrum, where the signals which are overlapping can be resolved to a very greater extent. But they are of little help for complex molecules, and definitely we need more advanced techniques. And in such situation, we talk about the 2D NMR spectrum. So this is where the advent of 2D NMR has taken place, which was introduced by Gene Jenner in 1971, which is used for the separation of signals when shift reagents and high resolution techniques have very little effect. And what exactly is a 2D NMR? It is, according to the periods, the number of periods in 1D NMR, if you have observed, the time period, which we have talked about here, see, preparation and detection. That means as soon as a pulse is given, immediately the signal is detected. Whereas in the case of 2D NMR, an additional time interval is inserted between preparation and detection. So that period we are calling it as evolution, and sometimes it is either 3 periods or it is 4 periods. That is, you will have an additional period that is called mixing time, where the NMR receiver is not active, so that the signal is not immediately detected as soon as the pulse is given, and the nuclear magnets are given time to evolve or interact among themselves. And that is how we can we can what we can do the 2D NMR technique, and that is what's the basic difference between a 1D and 2D NMR. And now the differences in the concepts, one by one, I'll tell you so that it will be more clear. So the property, if you consider in 1D NMR, it is induced magnetization varies with only one time variable, that is T2. Whereas in 2D NMR, it varies with two time variables. One is T1 and the other one is T2. So since there is only one time variable in 1D NMR, the Fourier transformation is done only once, that is T2. Whereas in 2D NMR, there are two time variables. The Fourier transformation has to be done twice. So Fourier transformation is nothing but the function of the signal function, which is a function of time, is now when you do the Fourier transformation, that will be converted into a function of frequency, where you can read the spectrum, which is in the form of which varies with the frequency, so that all the different kinds of nuclei or the proton NMR, if it is proton, we are going to see all the protons in the form of signals. Otherwise, we just cannot read the spectrum if it is with respect to time domain. And the number of axes in 1D NMR, there are two axes. One is X and the other one is Y, where the X axis represents delta as well as J. So delta is nothing but the chemical shift values or the chemical shifts of the signals or the protons, if it is a proton NMR. And the coupling constant, J, is nothing but the coupling constant. So both delta as well as J, that is both parameters, delta and J, are spread only on one axis, that is X, and the second axis is the intensity. Whereas in 2D NMR, the X refers to the conventional. X-axis is normally considered as a conventional axis. The conventional axis always will have the chemical shift values, and the Y-axis will either have J or the delta, depending upon the type of a 2D NMR technique. And again, the third dimension here, Z, is the intensity. So in both, whether it is 1D or 2D, you have an intensity. So intensity is varying with respect to one frequency variable in 1D and two frequency variables in 2D NMR. So 2D NMR is nothing but, it is called as a 2D NMR because we are making use of two dimensions to represent the important information, that is delta or J. Delta and J are delta again. Whereas in 1D NMR, we are making use of only one dimension, that is X-axis, to represent the important information with respect to NMR, that is delta and J. So hence it is 1D and this is 2D NMR. And the different phases or the periods present in 1D NMR are only two, that is preparation and detection. That is, as soon as a pulse is given, normally in the preparation, 90-degree pulse is given, immediately after the pulse is given, the signal is detected. Whereas in 2D NMR, the additional time interval is inserted between preparation and detection. That is what we are calling it as evolution. And the peaks, if we talk about the signal representation in 1D NMR, as we have seen just before, the NMR spectrum is represented in the form of peaks, whereas in the 2D NMR, it is either represented in the form of stacked plots or contoured spots. And again, the basic differences with respect to experimental procedures. On the top, you have 1D and 2D, and just below the 1D experimental, the procedure, you have 1D NMR spectrum, same ethanol molecule, and the same ethanol molecule in the 2D NMR spectrum, how it looks. See, you have again two axes here, whereas in 1D, only one axis we are showing for the signals. So So 3 signals are seen on the x-axis. One is CH2 downfield, then OH, then CH3. And if you closely observe the signals in 1D NMR on the x-axis, the signals are again split. So CH2 as a quartet and CH3 as a triplet. So the distance between successive lines is nothing but J. So that is also read only on the x-axis in 1D NMR. Whereas when it comes to 2D NMR, the 4 lines of a methylene quartet, they are just seen one below the other as contour spots. And the OH singlet is seen as only one singular contour, and CH3 triplet. So that means what here in 2D NMR, the x-axis is showing only the delta value. So all these 4 spots are lying on one vertical line. So naturally, they correspond to only one chemical shift value. And if you go to the y-axis, the y-axis gives you the J values, where it is a successive, the distance between any 2 successive contour peaks. So this is what is 2D NMR basically. And we are not going to the details of the experimental procedures. I'll just introduce to what exactly is the difference between 1D and 2D NMR, because we'll have to spend more time on the application part. So again, as I said, there are 3 or 4 periods. So the 4 periods are the 3 periods what are present in 2D NMR experiment are preparation, which is approximately of 10 seconds, wherein a 90-degree pulse is given to the spin system and the nuclei are allowed to relax to their equilibrium state, so that excess population is maintained at the ground level and the signal is seen with more intensity. So normally when a 90-degree pulse is given, the signal is seen with more intensity. It is followed by evolution period, and this is called T1 period. And the value of T1 changes from one experiment to another experiment, which I'm going to show it in the next slide, which is augmented. And during this period, the nuclear magnets will interact and the NMR receiver is switched off, so that you're not going to get the signal, unlike in the 1D immediately. And sometimes the evolution is followed by a mixing period, which is of a 0 to finite time, depending upon the experiment. And next is detection period, which is the final T2 period. That is, it's a fixed time. It is how many, maybe you are going to do more number of experiments, but still the T2 remains the same. Only the T1 changes from experiment to experiment. And in this even T1 period, that is evolution period, each time period, the signal is recorded and then it is kept aside. And finally, you are going to compile all the information which is done in different experiments. The T1 you're going to add up, and then finally the information is given up. And the experimental procedure here, so the first which is a function of 2 time variables, T2 and T1. The first Fourier transformation is always done in T2, which is nothing but the information which is going to come on the x-axis, which is nothing but a conventional axis. So the information pertaining to the x-axis is always with reference to T2. That is the detection time. So first the FT is done over rows and then followed by columns. So first you're going to get, when the Fourier transformation is done in T2, so the T2 will be converted into frequency domain, that is F2, and it still remains, T1 is still present. So again, we have to do second time Fourier transformation in the T1. So finally, you get the spectrum, the last picture you're going to see in the form of stacked plots. So double transform involving 2 intensity and 2 time variables are used. So here, as I said before, the experiment, it is not just done one time, the pulse, a train of pulse and series of experiments are being done. So the first on the left side, when you're looking at this slide, the left side, the first one is T1 is 0. Okay. And in the second experiment, the T1 is incremented to a certain extent. And the third experiment, T1 is 2 times the first one. So a definite increment is being done from first 0, then 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the T1 is augmented in each experiment, whereas the T2 is the same. It remains the same in all the experiments. And finally, the Fourier transformation is done twice, first over T2 and second over T1, where you are getting the information. So the information which is present in 1D NMR with respect to 2 variables, that is delta and J, because you are going to do the Fourier transformation twice, that is 1 over T2 and the other over T1, the information which was present earlier in 1D on one axis is now dragged down to the new axis. The second information is dragged down to the new axis, and the spectrum is either represented in the form of stacked plots or the contoured spots. Now, what are the different techniques which are there in 2D NMR, and which there are many 2D NMR techniques, but we'll restrict ourselves to the basic 2D NMR techniques, which are of much help with regard to the structures of the organic molecules. The first one is 2D J resolved spectroscopy, which is also called as ROSI resolved spectroscopy. And second one is correlation spectroscopy, which is nothing but COSY. And then total correlation spectroscopy, then heteronuclear multiple quantum coherence, then heteronuclear multiple bond coherence, and then nuclear Overhausen effect spectroscopy, and then finally incredible natural abundance double quantum transfer experiment, which is nothing but inadequate. So if you look at all these techniques, you may be a little confused and you may be a little worried. But if we can just simplify this, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First 5 techniques, that is up till heteronuclear multiple bond coherence, all are nothing but they are all just through bond connectivity. They just show the through bond connectivity. And in always in NMR spectrum, um, the connectivity of the molecules is only through bond. We are going to see only 3 bond connectivity. So the first 5 techniques we are referring to only the through bond connectivity, and the next one is nuclear Overhauser effect, which is a spatial proximity, which has nothing to do with the through bond connectivity. It is a spatial proximity, spatial interactions. And the last one again is a through bond connectivity, that is inadequate. We'll just talk about them when we actually come into that. So now 2D J resolved spectroscopy. We are talking about ROSI. So what exactly is a J resolved spectroscopy? As the name itself is indicating, J resolved spectroscopy. J resolved spectroscopy. So the x-axis here refers to delta and the y-axis here refers to J. So because the spectrum is resolved based on the couplings. The spectrum is resolved. Resolution is nothing but separation, isn't it? And we are talking about the 2D NMR techniques because we have to resolve the multiplets. And here the multiplets are resolved based on the J values. So hence it is a J resolved spectroscopy where the X refers to delta values and the Y refers to couplings. And as we said, it is couplings. You all know that there are different kinds of couplings. What are the different kinds of couplings? There are 2 types of couplings. One is homonuclear coupling, the other is heteronuclear coupling. So homonuclear is nothing but the coupling between the similar kind of nucleus. And heteronuclear coupling is the coupling between different kinds of nucleus. So based on this, the type of different coupling interactions, J-resolved spectroscopy is also of 2 types. One is homo-ROSI, the other is hetero-ROSI. Homo is when the coupled nuclei of the same kind. Hetero means when the coupled nuclei of different kind. And next, in homonuclear 2D J-resolved spectroscopy, which is in short called as homo-ROSI, what exactly is happening? The x-axis refers to, because where do you observe the homonuclear couplings? See, when you're talking about the NMR spectroscopy, we are basically the organic, because my interest is only on the organic molecules, the emphasis. All the organic molecules are nothing but hydrocarbons. It is it's a chemistry of carbon compounds. So the backbone is a hydrocarbon. So if you are familiar with carbon and proton, it is done. We know the structure of organic molecules, isn't it? So homo means here we're talking about proton, and in proton NMR, we are going to observe homonuclear couplings. Isn't it? In proton NMR, we are going to observe only the coupling between proton and proton. So in homo-ROSI, the x-axis will contain the chemical shifts of protons, and the y-axis, the coupling interaction, what we are going to observe in homonuclear or in proton NMR is nothing but between proton and proton. So the y-axis here refers to J, as I said before. What J, which J? It is a coupling between proton and proton. So the y-axis is proton-proton couplings. And it is a powerful technique for resolving complex multiplets of 1D NMR. As I said previously, progesterone molecule, I said, where there are 24 different kinds of protons and you have different multiplets which are having very close by chemical shift values. And if you are going to talk about 2D NMR spectrum of such molecules, it is of help. But for your understanding, I'm not taking such a complicated molecule. It needs more practice. So let me take some simple molecules and try to explain. And the pulse sequence is given below. So it contains 90-degree pulse, the preparation, and followed by evolution, where 180-degree pulse is given, and immediately after that, detection is the signal of the detection of the signal is taking place. So that is T2, and the evolution we're calling it as T1. So this is a pulse sequence, and yeah. So here in this one, in this spectrum, which is represented here on the top and below, there is not much difference between the top and the below one. It is only just the tilt by 45-degree angle. So to the left, you are finding a multiplet, which is not it. In fact, if you just count the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, five signals are present, but in fact, it is a combination of two quartets. Whereas again, you're finding a quartet, 4-line, and then triplet, and then 2-line, and a singlet. So here there are two to the extreme left, you are finding two quartets almost merging. And if you are going to observe that as such like that on 1D, so on the top, we are representing the 1D. So always for reference, we are going to write, or we are going to draw the 1D spectrum on the top for reference. And the matrix here inside the box, that is what we are calling it as matrix. And that is what is the actual 2D picture. So the 2D information is just seen only in the box, not outside the box. So on the top is the conventional or the 1D NMR. Maybe it is a proton, maybe it is a C13. So here it is not mentioned whether it is proton or a C13. So on the top, you are observing a conventional 1D NMR. So the two quartets, which are in fact merging, where you're not finding either 8 lines or two quartets separately, but they're merging to give you a quintet. You are observing a quintet that is resolved. See, the bottommost, if you consider, they're resolved to a greater extent. The reason is for a one particular signal in a 2D NMR spectrum, it will occupy only a single space line, because the 2D NMR, the rosy spectrum, the x-axis will have chemical shift, only chemical shift value. It will not have any J values. So if a particular signal is seen as a multiplet, for example, doublet, it will occupy how many lines on the x-axis in 1D? 2 lines. For a triplet, how many lines does it occupy? On the x-axis, 3 lines. Whereas in 1D, in 2D NMR, whether it is a doublet, a triplet, or a quartet, or a quintet, or a multiplet, it will occupy only a single space line on the x-axis. And that is where the resolution is possible with respect to 2D NMR. So now the two quartets, which were seen merged on 1D NMR on the top, they are now resolved. So you're finding separately to the extreme left, you're finding two quartets. And the rest is simple, because even in 1D NMR, there is no overlapping that part. So this is a general example what I have taken. And now I'll explain this more clearly with respect to a specific example, which is here, pyrrole 2 carboxylic acid, which is in deuterium oxide. So deuterium oxide means definitely you're not going to see the labile protons. What are the labile protons present in this molecule? NH and the CO2H protons. So hence they are not seen in the spectrum. So you're going to see the signals due to A, M, X, where I have labeled A proton, M proton, and X proton. And this is the AMX case, where A proton couples with M, and it also couples with X. So A is seen as a double doublet. Similarly, M is seen as a double doublet, and X is also seen as a double doublet. So you are going to see for A, double doublet, 4 lines, and then M, 4 lines, and X, 4 lines. So in total, you're going to find 12 lines. And if suppose this molecule, if suppose the chemical shift values are very close by, unlike in this molecule, the 12 lines may merge and you may not see them so clearly as it is seen here. But the 2D NMR, how it looks, see. The A proton, 4 lines, they are seen as 4 spots, contour spots, one below the other. They're occupying only a single space line on the x-axis, isn't it? And similarly M, similarly X. So there is no overlapping question. So this is the advantage of 2D NMR technique, especially with reference to rosy spectrum. So x-axis is delta of protons and y-axis is coupling between protons and protons. So this is the 2D NMR spectrum of pyrrole 2 carboxylic acid in deuterium oxide. I think you have understood homorosy. So now finally, what is the conclusion you can draw from homorosy? Homorosy is, as as far as our discussion so far, we can understand HOMO-ROSY is nothing but it is a 2D NMR of proton, conventional proton NMR, because HOMO-ROSY means what? It's a J-resolved spectrum wherein the y-axis is couplings between similar nuclei. And here, when we refer to C13 and proton, similar couplings we are going to observe only in which kind of NMR? Only proton. So definitely the conventional proton NMR we are trying to represent in the 2D form, which we are calling it as HOMO-ROSY. Okay. Now let us come to heteronuclear 2D J-resolved spectroscopy, that is called hetero-ROSY. Hetero-ROSY. So here hetero-ROSY separates C13 chemical shifts along x-axis and C13 proton coupling constants along y-axis in the spectrum. As I said, heteronuclear coupling, hetero-ROSY is nothing but a spectrum which involves heteronuclear couplings. And in which spectrum we observe heteronuclear couplings among proton and C13? Only C13 NMR. So the X here refers to delta values of C13 and Y refers to couplings between proton, carbon and proton. So it is nothing but conventional C13 NMR. We are trying to represent in the 2D form. That's it. So the conventional C13 NMR, that is conventional C13 NMR is 1D C13 NMR. We are trying to represent in the form of a 2D hetero-ROSY. It separates the overlapping multiplets. What is the advantage? It separates the overlapping multiplets in proton coupled C13 NMR. Same thing. So whatever, with whatever intention we have started HOMO-ROSY, the same intention we are doing hetero-ROSY. Suppose a spectrum, a molecule is very complicated, and you all know that the C13 NMR is the chemical shifts, they range between 0 to 300 ppm, and the coupling constant for C13 is also very high. It will vary between 50 to 250 hertz, unlike in the proton NMR. So the multiplets in C13 NMR, if you consider the proton coupled C13 NMR, the multiplets are wide, whereas the multiplets in proton NMR are very narrow. So definitely the space occupied by a single multiplet in C13 NMR is very large compared to the multiplet which is occupied by the proton, by the protons in proton NMR. So that is how this is of very much help even for C13 NMR. It will separate the overlapping multiplets in proton coupled C13 NMR. So in C13 NMR, we have different kinds of NMR, isn't it? One is decoupled C. That is the reason why C13 NMR, we are mainly referring to proton decoupled C13 NMR. The reason is when you talk about the proton coupled C13 NMR, the coupling between carbon and proton being very high because it is just one bond couplings, the multiplets are wide apart. So hence, mostly C13 means we refer to only the decoupled spectrum where we will not have any kind of information with regards to the nature of the carbon. And JCH is nothing but the distance between, again, adjacent contours in a split signal. And there are several ways of recording hetero-ROSY, and the simplest is gated decoupled method. There are many methods by which you can record the hetero-ROSY, which we are not interested. One is gated decoupled method. So gated decoupled method means nothing but in the spectrophotometer, we have a provision for the decoupler, which can be switched on and switched off according to the requirement. So the pulse sequence here, when you talk about the hetero, always in whether it is hetero-ROSY or hetero-COSY, whenever you come across the term hetero-ROSY or hetero, you'll have to understand one thing: homo and hetero, the difference between homo and hetero. Hetero means definitely you will have irradiation in two channels. Irradiation means we'll have to irradiate the sample in two channels. So here, when you consider the pulse sequence, you are giving the pulse in two channels. On the top, you are giving the pulse in proton channels, and below, at the bottom, you're giving the irradiation in the C13 channels. So because we'll have to irradiate the sample even in the proton channels, then only the protons also will get affected, because we are going to see the coupling between carbon and proton, isn't it? Carbon and proton, whether coupling or decoupling. So on the top, see, you are going to give the irradiation in the proton channels, that is preparation and then evolution and detection. And below C13, a 90-degree pulse is given, followed by 180, and then finally detection. And now when you look at the molecule, the spectrum to the right side, it is 1,2,2-trichloropropane. So now it is C13 NMR. So hetero means it is C13. Remember one thing, it's not a proton NMR, it's a C13 NMR. So C13 NMR, how many signals you get for This molecule 1,2,2 trichloropropane, it depends upon the number of non-equivalent carbons. So how many different carbons are there in this? Propane, 3 carbons. So one is downfield B carbon. I have labeled the carbons there. Downfield carbon B, and next is C, next is up A. So B, does it have any protons? No. So in the C13 NMR, we are saying the coupling is between carbon and proton. We are going to observe coupling between carbon and proton. Coupling between carbon and proton. So the downfield B carbon is a singlet because it doesn't have any protons, isn't it? So you're going to see only one single spot. And next is C carbon. It has 2 protons. CH2 carbon. It has 2 protons. So it is split into a triplet according to n+1 rule. You all know, I think, n+1 rule. N is nothing but the number of neighboring nuclei. And in C13 NMR, the neighboring nuclear is with reference to protons. The particular carbon is split into a multiplet according to the number of attached protons. So for the CH2 carbon, how many attached protons are there? 2 protons. Hence, it is seen as a triplet. And next is upfield A carbon, which is a CH3 carbon. Since it has got 3 protons, it is split into a quartet. So that is the advantage of C13 NMR, the coupled spectrum. C13 proton coupled NMR, the advantage is we can know the nature of the carbon. If you are getting a singlet in C13 NMR, singlet in C13 proton coupled C13 NMR, it means it is a quaternary carbon. It has no attached protons. If you're getting a doublet, it means it is a CH carbon. If you're getting a triplet, it means it is a CH2 carbon. And if you're getting a quartet, it means it is a CH3 carbon. That is the advantage of C13 NMR. Hence, C13 NMR gives a more reliable information compared to proton, and it gives a direct evidence for the carbon skeleton compared to the proton, because proton gives an indirect evidence for the carbon skeleton, whereas C13 NMR gives a direct evidence for the carbon skeleton. And now the same thing, the 2D NMR here, heterorosy, the matrix in the box, what we are observing is the coupled proton coupled C13 NMR. This is 1,2,2 trichloropropane. And I think I have 2 more examples. So to the left, you are seeing the methyl ester of furic acid, methyl furite, you can say. So there are how many different carbons are there? There are 6 carbons. So I have just given numbering. It is just according, it is not numbering, not according to the nomenclature. I've just given, for convenience, I have given the numbering. So you know that in C13 NMR, the downfield carbon is carbonyl. So it is C2 carbon, which is seen downfield. And since it doesn't have any attached protons, it is seen as a singlet. When you observe the 2D NMR spectrum in the matrix, singlet, only single contour peak is seen on the horizontal line. Next, C6 carbon. C6 carbon is nothing but a CH. So it has got 1 attached proton. So you are going to observe a doublet for that. And again, C3 is a quaternary carbon. There are no protons. So hence it is seen as a single spot. Next, C4, again CH carbon, a doublet. And C5, again CH carbon and doublet. And C1 is nothing but methoxy. So CH3, there are 3 protons. So hence you're going to observe a quartet for this. Similarly, to the right, when you come, it is geraniol. It is a more complicated molecule, geraniol. It's a natural product, terpenol. So you are going to find there are 10 different carbons in this. There are 10 different carbons. And the downmost carbons are the quaternary carbons, 3 and 7. There are no, because there are quaternary carbons, there are no attached protons. So hence they are seen as singlets. They have to be seen as singlets. And on the top, what I have shown on the top is the proton decoupled C13 NMR. All single lines, what I'm representing, it is a proton decoupled C13 NMR. So always in 2D NMR, as a reference, as I said, we are going to show the conventional 1D NMR. Since it is heterorosy, the conventional NMR, what we have to represent is C13 NMR. So 3 is, and we are showing only the decoupled. We are not showing the coupled spectrum. Okay, so 3, whether it is CH carbon or a quaternary carbon or a CH2 carbon or a CH3 carbon, in the decoupled proton, decoupled C13 NMR, all the carbons, irrespective of their attached protons, they are just collapsed to singlets. You don't want to observe them as only singlets. That is the reason why I'm just shown only the singlets. So 3, 7 singlets, 2 and 6 carbons, they are there are no attached protons, so they are just seen as doublets. And next is 1, 4, 5, all are methylene carbons, CH2 carbons, so they are seen as 1, 4, 5. If you can observe, all are triplets. Next 9, 8, 10, they are methyl carbons. 9, 8, 10, all are methyl carbons, and they are seen, since they are methyl carbons, they'll be seen as quartets. That's it. So this is about the heterorosy. I think now you have understood what is homorosy and heterorosy. So rosy is nothing but resolved spectroscopy, J resolved spectroscopy, and this 2D NMR spectrum. In rosy, we are trying to separate the delta and J on two different axes. So delta is on the conventional axis and J is on the Y axis. So hence it is known as a resolved spectroscopy, J resolved spectroscopy. And since J is nothing but coupling, and the coupling is between different similar kind of nuclei, that is homo, or different kinds of nuclei, hetero. So hence we have two types of rosy techniques. One is homorosy, the other is heterorosy. And homorosy is nothing but conventional proton NMR we are representing in the 3 dimensions, that is 2D NMR. And heterorosy is conventional C13 NMR, that is coupled C13 NMR, proton coupled C13 NMR in the form of 2D NMR. Okay, now we'll come to COSY, correlation spectroscopy. So what is this correlation spectroscopy? Correlation. We are trying to establish a correlation between, that is between one entity to another entity, or connectivity. Correlation is nothing but connectivity. So as far as NMR is concerned, what do you mean by connectivity? How do we know a particular nucleus? Connectivity means nothing but interaction. And how do we know that a particular nucleus is interacting with another nucleus in the NMR spectrum? How is that information displayed in the spectrum? How do we know that a particular nucleus is interacting with another nucleus? Or how do we know that there is a connectivity between these two nucleus in the NMR spectrum? Okay, I'm saying here in general terms, nucleus. The nucleus may be a proton, a C13, or any other magnetic nucleus. For example, proton NMR. Let me talk about the proton NMR spectrum. In proton NMR spectrum, how do we know that a particular nucleus? For example, let us take the simplest example, ethanol molecule, CH3, CH2OH, isn't it? We are saying that let us not take ethanol, let us take ethyl fragment or ethyl halide. So there are two different kinds of protons. One is methyl, the other is methylene. So two different kinds of protons, and the two different kinds, methylene is interacting with methyl and methyl is interacting with methylene. So how do we know that methyl is interacting with methylene, and how do we know that methylene is interacting with methyl? By the multiplicity. So if a signal is splitting into a multiplet, then we can say it has got a neighborhood and it is interacting with that. And that is what we are saying coupling or the connectivity. So the connectivity so far what we have discussed, okay, which we have discussed whether it is in conventional or 2D NMR so far, that is J resolved spectroscopy, is nothing but multiplicity is shown in the form of multiplicity, isn't it? Whenever you are observing a single peak and singlet, what does it mean? It means it has no neighborhood. When it has no neighborhood, it doesn't couple, it will not interact. For example, if you take the proton NMR spectrum of methane, how many signals you get? You get only one signal because there's only one kind of proton. Okay, and there are 4 protons, but only one set. So you get a singlet. Similarly, benzene, when you take the proton NMR spectrum, there are 6 protons, but all the 6 protons are equivalent. You get only one signal. And that signal is not split because it has no neighborhood. But if you talk about propane, you get 3 signals because there are 3 protons, but 1 and 3 protons are same and second one is different. So you get 2 signals. So that means you can know that, and these signals are split. For example, isopropyl halide, if you take isopropyl halide, if you take, you get 2 signals, a doublet for methyl and a septet for a methine proton, because methine couples with 2 methyls, n plus 1, 6 plus 1, 7. And the methyls, 2 methyls, CH3, CH3, they couple with methine. So it is split into a doublet. So the multiplicity tells us that the multiplicity of a signal tells us about the neighborhood or the connectivity. And that's what we have seen so far in the J-resolved spectroscopy. And in connectivity, in correlation spectroscopy, the same interaction is shown not in the form of multiplicity, but it is represented in the form of a cross peak. So it is again the same information what we are going to see here, but in a different way in the form of correlation diagrams. So if you can say that a particular nucleus or a proton is interacting with another proton, then we can find that interaction is reflected not in the form of multiplet or in the form of multiplicity, as in the case of resolved spectroscopy, J-resolved spectroscopy, but in the form of cross peaks. And hence it is a COSY spectrum, correlation spectroscopy. So here, hence we are saying we don't find any J values. So hence both the axes here refer to only delta. X-axis refers to delta and Y-axis refers to delta. Then you might have a doubt. What is this delta on both the axes? One is X as well as one X-axis as well as Y-axis. So here again, the interaction, the coupling interaction may be between similar kind of nuclei like proton-proton. Hence it is homonuclear or homocozy. Between different kinds of nuclei, like for example, carbon and proton, it is heterocozy. So again, homocozy is nothing but it's a conventional proton NMR. Okay, we are trying to represent in the form of a 2D NMR. And heterocozy is nothing but conventional C13 NMR. We are trying to represent in the form of a 2D NMR. Okay, let us see homocozy. Only thing is we are going to see the information not in the form of J, but in the form of cross peaks. So if you find a cross peak between the two coupled nuclei, then we can say that those two are coupled. If you don't find any cross peak connecting them, then we say they don't couple with each other. We are going to see in the next slides. So this is helpful in complex organic molecules. It gives proton-proton connectivity through cross peaks. So homocozy, this is a pulse sequence, 90-degree pulse followed by another 90 and then detection. So homo always, I said, only one channel. So you have only one channel here. So the x-axis refers to delta values of protons and y-axis also refers to only delta because we are trying to correlate between protons, proton and proton. So x and y refer to only the delta values of protons. See, so you find two types of peaks in homocozy. So diagonal peaks and off-diagonal peaks. Off-diagonal peaks are also called as cross peaks. So what are these diagonal peaks? The peaks which are present on the diagonal line. So there is a diagonal line. In the square, you are going to, I have shown a diagonal line. So on the diagonal line, the peaks which are present, they are called as diagonal peaks or the diagonal spots. They are referred to the chemical shift values of the coupled protons. So these are the spins which do not exchange their magnetization. Okay. And next, off diagonal peaks are cross peaks. Spins that exchange magnetization due to coupling give cross peaks, cross correlation peaks. So where are these? They are present symmetrically placed above and below the diagonal line. So above and below the diagonal line at the corners, you are finding two peaks, isn't it? On the top as well as on the bottom. Top of the diagonal line and bottom of the diagonal line. They are not on the diagonal. They are not present on the diagonal line. They are present above, either above or below, symmetrically placed above and below the diagonal line. And these cross peaks, what do they signify? They are the connectivity links between the two protons, B and A protons. For example, there are two protons in a particular molecule. So B will couple with A and A will couple with B. So hence you are going to see a doublet for B and a doublet for A. And that is a doublet. I have shown the conventional NMR on the top x-axis, onto the left y-axis. So the B is doublet, A is doublet, the coupling information. That is the conventional NMR. But here we are trying to represent the COSY in the matrix, in the box, inside the box. So we are not going to show in the form of multiplicity. We will have to show it only in the form of cross peak. So there is a cross peak here connecting between A and B. So if suppose there is no cross peak, what does it mean? That means A doesn't couple with B and B doesn't couple with A, and B is seen as a singlet and A is seen as a singlet. But here B and A are seen as doublets. Hence A is coupling with B and B is also coupling with A, and hence you are finding the cross peaks. So this is the significance of cross peaks. And one more thing, the diagonal peaks, they represent, if you take any diagonal peak, okay, the spots are the peaks on the diagonal line. For example, let us consider the B. So that is equal to F2, F1 on both the axes. If you read on the x-axis, this will refer to the B refers to on the x-axis delta value of B, and on the y-axis also it refers to the delta of B. So it is F2 equal to F1, okay, equal to either A or B. If suppose we are considering this, it is B. On the topmost portion, if you consider, it is A. Whereas if you refer to the cross peak, just come to any of the cross peak. Let us consider the above cross peak, which is present above the diagonal line. That particular diagonal line, it refers to, on the F2 axis, it refers to delta of B, but on the y-axis, if you refer, it will refer to delta of A. Similarly, when you come to the cross peak below the diagonal line, on the x-axis, it will refer to the delta of A, and on the y-axis, it will refer to the delta of B. That means what? These two are the connecting peaks. They are at any point, they are connecting to both B and A. So these are called as cross peaks. You will understand more clearly when you talk about the example. I have taken two isomers here, one propanol and two propanol. So you will clearly understand here. So on both the axes, let us first consider one propanol example. So one propanol homocozy means it is only proton NMR. So on the x-axis, it is proton NMR. On the y-axis, also it is proton NMR. Only in the matrix, that is inside the box, we are referring to 2D NMR. So one propanol, so 1, 2, 3. There are three different kinds of protons along with hydroxyl. So one is CH2 proton, which is attached to OH. So it is seen as here a multiplet. We are showing it as a multiplet because it couples with the adjacent CH2 also with the OH. Next is, I'm coming from left, downfield, okay, slowly to upfield. Next in between, which is not labeled, that is nothing but a hydroxyl proton, which is seen as on a enlarged high resolution. You can consider it as a triplet because it is coupling to CH2 proton. Next is the next methylene, that is CH2 proton, that is coupling to methyl and methylene, hence it is a multiplet again. This is what I'm referring to is on the conventional NMR on the top. I'm not talking about the 2D NMR picture. I'll come again, 2D NMR inside. And last to the extreme right is the third proton, that is methyl proton. Since it is coupling with the adjacent CH2, it is seen as a triplet. So the same is reflected even on the y-axis. So I have just referred to only the conventional NMR so far. Now let us come to the 2D picture. So in the 2D picture, there is no multiplicity. Only the cross peaks should say that they are interacting. So first, let us come to the first proton, that is CH2 proton, which is near to OH. Okay. So that first proton, it will couple to the second proton, second methylene, as well as to hydroxyl. So it should have connectivity to the second proton as well as to the hydroxyl proton. So you're finding cross peaks, isn't it, students? You're able to see. Okay. So you're finding two cross peaks. You can draw a square, isn't it? I have not drawn a square, but you can see a box-like thing connecting the peaks, hydroxyl peak and the one peak. Similarly, the same one is having connectivity to the second proton. Another box-like thing you can draw, isn't it? But this is not showing any connectivity to the third one. It doesn't have any cross peak. That means the CH2 is not coupling to the terminal methyl. Okay, next, coming to the OH, second one. OH is coupling only to the CH2 proton, which is next to it. So that we have already shown it. Next, second proton, CH2 proton, it has now two connectivities, one to methyl on one side and the another to methylene on the other side. So it is having a cross peak connecting to the third proton also. You can find the cross peak there. You can draw a box. This is about one propanol. Just closely observe, you will understand, students. And next, 2-propanol, if you consider. 2-propanol, how many signals you have? Again, it is, we are talking about homo cozy. So it is nothing but proton NMR. So in proton NMR, 2-propanol, that is nothing but isopropyl alcohol. How many signals you have? You have only 3. One is for the 2 methyls, they are equivalent, they give 1 signal, and methane proton, only 1 signal, and hydroxyl. So including hydroxyl, you'll have 3 peaks. Otherwise, you have only 2. 1 and 3 together you get, and 2 you get separately. So if you just consider the conventional NMR on the top onto the left side, so downmost signal is the second proton, that is CH proton. It is a multiplet coupling to the methyls as well as to a hydroxyl. And then a small peak, that is a hydroxyl proton. Next 1 and 3 together, it is coming as a doublet because they are methyl protons. They couple with the CH proton. The neighborhood is CH, only 1. N is 1. So N plus 1 is 2. So you get a doublet. The same thing is reflected even on the y-axis. Now coming to the matrix, that is the 2D spectrum, that is the homocozy. You will have connecting between the CH proton and the hydroxyl proton. So a box you can draw. Cross peaks are present symmetrically above and below, where you can complete the box square. And again, this the second has also the second proton, CH proton, also has got a connectivity to the third. So you can have another box. But if you closely observe on the top, the 2 spots, diagonal spots, which are just one below the other, that is 1,3 and hydroxyl, there is no cross peak. You just look at that. There is no cross peak connecting those hydroxyl proton and 1,3 because they are not coupling. So you're finding cross peaks only, cross peaks between those protons only which are coupled. Those which are not coupled, you're not finding any cross peaks. So here the coupling information is displayed in the spectrum in the form of cross peaks, unlike in the form of multiplicity, as in the case of J-resolve spectroscopy. So COSY is nothing different or difficult. Only thing is our mind is all the way till now we are able to visualize that in the NMR spectrum, if a particular nucleus, whether it is a proton or a C13 or anything, if it is coupling with any other proton, it has to split, and that is seen in the form of a multiplet. But the same information is shown up in the COSY or in the correlated spectroscopy in the form of a cross peak, not in the form of multiplicity. Okay, students, this is about homocozy. I think I have made it very clear. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me at the end of this session. And now, heterocozy. Let us come to heterocozy. Heterocozy is nothing but, again, coupling interaction between different nuclei. So different nuclei means heteronuclear, especially the conventional NMR, what we have seen so far is C13 NMR, where you're going to observe coupling between carbon and proton. Carbon and proton, heteronuclear coupling, so it is heterocozy. And again, here the connectivity is shown in the form of cross peaks. So in this, the x-axis refers to delta of C13 because it is a conventional C13 NMR. So x-axis always is C13 NMR. And since we are trying to show the connectivity between carbon and proton to which it is coupled, y-axis refers to the delta values of proton, or for reference, we are going to show on the x-axis C13 NMR, and the y-axis we are going to show the proton NMR. But always the conventional C13 NMR, which is shown here in 2D NMR for our reference, is just decoupled. Okay, decoupled spectrum means we are not going to show the coupling information. Only carbons are seen as singlets because they are decoupled with protons. The pulse sequence is given here. So on the top, the irradiation is with reference to proton channels. On the bottom, it is reference to C13. So here again, hetero means, as I said, 2 channels. Homo means only 1 channel. So in homorosy, we have seen only 1 channel. And in homocozy also, we have seen only 1 channel. But in heterorosy and heterocozy, we are seeing 2 channels. Next, are you able to hear me? Examples of heterocozy.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello, Vilpisunda, are you
Oh,
able to hear?
it is audible, madam.
Okay. I have a doubt. That's the reason why
No,
I'm
madam.
just.
No, madam.
So, is it clear? Am I going little fast?
Okay, madam. Carry on.
No problem. Okay. So next we'll go to the heterocozy. So heterocozy in short is also known as headcore. So headcore is nothing but heterocozy spectrum. So the example here taken is 2-nitropropane. So it is nothing but C13 NMR, conventional C13 NMR we are trying to represent in the 2D form. So 2-nitropropane, C13 NMR, how many signals does it give? It gives only 2 signals. One is CH carbon, the other is methyl carbons. 1 and 3 carbons, they come together because they are equivalent as one signal. And the second carbon, that is methane carbon, comes separately. So now the second CH carbon is downfield. So on the x-axis, I have shown the conventional 2D NMR, conventional C13 NMR. So that is 2, which is very small. So the number 2 refers to the second carbon signal, and decoupled spectrum, proton coupled C13 NMR. The decoupled spectrum, see the signals, the intensity is very low because the second carbon, it is a methane carbon, it has got only one proton. So the signal intensity depends upon the number of attached protons. More are the number of protons, more is the intensity. So second carbon, because it is a CH carbon, the intensity is less compared to 1 and 3 because they are methyl. See the intensity of 1 and 3 signal, it is little higher. So this and next on the y-axis, we are referring to the proton NMR spectrum. And now individually, you look at the C13 NMR, individually look at the proton NMR. And when you are looking at the inside the box, that is the matrix, that is the 2D. So now let me analyze individually the proton NMR. So when you talk about the proton NMR spectrum of 2-nitropropane, how many signals you get? Again, 2 signals. There are 2 different kinds of protons. One is the methane proton, the other is methyl protons. 1 and 3 methyl protons together, and 2 methane CH proton separately. So the downfield signal is methane, that is second proton. It is seen as a multiplet because it couples with 2 methyls. So it is n plus 1, 6 plus 1. So septet, and upfield signal, that is due to 1 and 3, it will couple with, they'll couple together with methane proton. So it is doublet. So that is individually proton. And then the top I have already explained, that is C13. Now coming to the matrix form, the connectivity between this C13 and proton. Now we'll have to look for the connectivity, the cross peaks. So where do you find the cross peaks? So cross peaks are very clearly, if you observe, you can see just the orange dot on the diagonal line. So this is an imaginary diagonal line. It will not be always a diagonal line symmetrically. So imaginary, you can think that the cross peaks are present, they lie on an imaginary diagonal line. So orange peaks they are showing, they are at the corners. If you can draw this, 1 and 3 on the x-axis, 1 and 3, below 1 and 3 signal, if you come down, you're finding one dot orange color that has got a connectivity to 1 and 3 proton on the y-axis. Why? Because the 1 and 3 C13s, 1 and 3 carbons, methyl carbons, they are in C13 NMR, they are coupled to the protons present on them itself, that is 1 and 3 protons. Hence, we are finding a connectivity. So that cross peak is showing connectivity to C13 on x-axis and proton on y-axis. Similarly, if you come down, the next bottom, if you consider another orange dot you are observing, just below the carbon signal, 2 carbon signal, okay, vertical, if you come down, you can find another orange dot, slight dot, which is showing the connectivity to another. What if you draw a horizontal line? Okay, a vertical and a horizontal line. A vertical line from a C13 and a horizontal line that connects to proton on the y-axis. So only those, for those, we are going to find the connectivity for only those which are coupled, not for those which are not coupled. So you're not finding any connectivity between 1, 3 and 2. Are you finding any connectivity between 1, 3 and 2? Or 2 and 1 and 3? No. You're finding a connectivity between 1, 3 carbons to 1, 3 protons, 2 carbon to second proton. That's it. So because the C13 NMR is, the coupling is between carbon and proton. Which proton? Attached proton. So this is what is head core spectrum, heterocozy. So it is the matrix is the 2D NMR spectrum of conventional C13 NMR. It is nothing other than the conventional C13 NMR. That's it. It's not anything different. 2D NMR is nothing different. It is only the conventional NMR. Only thing is we are representing in the two-dimensional form so that you'll have more clarity. That's it. For only clarity, we are referring to 2D NMR. For simple molecules, we can just work it out with ordinary conventional NMR, 1D NMR. Only for complex molecules, then we go to. But for understanding, I'm taking simple examples. So again, another example, little complicated example, and isopentyl acetate. Heterocozy spectrum of isopentyl acetate. So this structure is given to the right side. So isopentyl acetate, acetate is CH3COO. It is an ester of acetic acid. So CH3COO acetate. What kind of an acetate it is? Isopentyl. So you have isopentyl group here attached to this. So this is isopentyl acetate head core spectrum. So the x-axis refers to C13 and the y-axis refers to proton. So here I have not shown the C13 NMR. I have not shown the carbonyl peak, that is C5, because it has no attached protons. So I have not shown. Even if it is shown, it will not have any cross peak because it has no attached protons. So how many signals you find here? 4, 3, 2, 1, and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 5 signals you're going to see. So from downfield, if you consider, first is fourth carbon, downmost signal OCH2. Next is third carbon. Next is second carbon. Next one, both methyls together they come. Next is sixth carbon. So this is the C13 NMR gradation as far as the chemical shift is concerned. But when you come to the proton NMR spectrum onto the y-axis, the chemical shift values are slightly different. They're not following the same gradation. Normally, in most of the cases, the proton and C13 NMR for any molecule, the chemical shift values follow the similar trend. That means, for example, ethanol, CH3, CH2. So downfield signal is CH2, isn't it? In ethanol, OH is depending upon the concentration of the solution, depending upon the solvent, and it varies. But among CH3 and CH2, which is downfield, means definitely without any ambiguity, we say CH2 is downfield proton, and next is CH3 proton. This is proton NMR. But when it comes to C13 NMR, definitely we say CH2 carbon is downfield and CH3 carbon is upfield. So the same gradation is followed as far as the chemical shift is concerned with respect to C13 and proton, normally in most of the cases. In very few cases, they change. So here the order is for C13, 4, once again I'm reading, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 6. Whereas in proton, 4 no doubt is a downmost signal, OCH2 proton. Next, it is not the third proton, but it is the sixth proton, that is acetyl proton, CH3CO. Acetyl proton is downfield compared to other ones. So it is seen as a singlet because it has no neighborhood. There are no protons on the carbonyl, so it will not couple. So it is seen as a singlet. So sixth proton on the y-axis, if you see, it is just a singlet. But fourth proton, it is seen as a triplet. If you closely observe, it is a triplet because it has got an adjacent CH2. It will couple with that. So it is seen as a triplet. Next is 2 proton. It is coupling with not only the 2 methyls from one side, but also to a methylene on the other side. So it is a multiplet. On high resolution, you can observe that, but it is of very low intensity. You may not observe. Only thing is, it is a multiplet you can consider. Next is third proton, that is CH2. It will again couple with CH2 on one side, fourth, and again onto the second. So it is again a multiplet. Next is 1. Both the methyls, they couple with the adjacent CH proton into a doublet. So 1 is a doublet, you can clearly observe. 6 is a singlet because there are no neighborhood protons. And 4th is a triplet. The rest of them are multiplets. Now, let us come to the het-core spectrum or the heterocozy spectrum of isopentyl acetate. Now just concentrate in the matrix inside the box. Okay, let us come one by one. We'll start from left. So fourth signal on the carbon C13 NMR x-axis. Fourth signal. It has to have a connectivity to which proton? Only the fourth proton. So you are finding, draw a line vertically below the fourth signal, okay, signal 4. And when you try to connect it to the y-axis, it will connect to the, okay, cross peak. There is a cross peak dot I'm showing, okay, at the corner. That is a cross peak which is connecting to the fourth. Similarly, third carbon, there is a cross peak connecting third carbon to third proton on the y-axis. Draw a line vertically from third carbon and draw a line horizontally. It will connect. The corners meet at, okay, at a diagonal point where they connect to third carbon and third proton. Similarly, you can explain for 2, 1, and 6. So here, the cross peaks, as I said before, they lie more or less, they lie, okay, on an imaginary diagonal line. So where exactly they're going to lie on an imaginary diagonal line? In cases where for a particular molecule, the chemical shift values follow a similar gradation for both C13 and proton. Then you can find the cross peaks which are lying on a diagonal line. But in cases like this, they don't lie on exactly on a diagonal line because they're not following the same gradation here. As far as C13 is concerned, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6 is the order. And as far as the proton is concerned, it is 4, 6, 2, 3, 1. So definitely they don't follow the same gradation. And the cross peaks also will not lie on the diagonal line. That's the reason why he said they lie on an imaginary diagonal line, more or less. So don't worry about lying of these cross peaks on the diagonal line. Only thing is you'll have to see the connectivity. So this is the het-core spectrum or heterocozy. Next, we'll come to total correlation spectroscopy. So total correlation spectroscopy, it is nothing but it correlates, as the name itself is indicating, correlates all protons of a spin system. For example, if you have a spin system ABCD spin system you have, they are continuous. One thing, it should be continuous, ABCD. There should not be any disconnection between ABCD. A should be connected to B should be connected to C should be connected to D, as far as the carbon chain is considered, with the attached protons. Then what happens is, in TOCSY spectrum, total correlation, A will have 3 connectivities. That is, A will be coupled to B will be coupled to C will be coupled to D. So this TOCSY we refer to with reference to COSY, that is homocozy. So if you try to understand TOCSY with reference to homocozy, it will be more easy. In homocozy, for example, in the same ABCD pattern, we say that A is connected directly to B and B is connected to C is connected to D. That means what? A will have neighborhood, A is having a neighborhood as B, but A will not have C as a neighborhood, and A will not have D as a neighborhood. A will have a neighborhood only to B, but B will have a neighborhood to A on one side and C on one side. Similarly, C will have a neighborhood on one side to B and on another side to D, and D will have neighborhood only to C. This is normal homocozy. But in TOCSY, every proton, every nucleus in the spin system will have a correlation, or it will have some connectivity to every other spin. So A will have 3 connectivities to B, to C, to D, and similarly B will have connectivity not only to A and B and C but also to D. So 3. So each will have connectivity to every other spin in the total spin system. So that means the magnetization is dispersed over a complete spin system of a molecule by successive scalar coupling. This is what is COSY, TOCSY, total correlation spectroscopy. So this is the diagram which I have represented with reference to colors so that you can clearly observe. So it is a homocozy. Cozy we are referring to with reference to homo. So proton-proton coupling. So on the left side, it is cozy. On the right side, it is toxy. So off-diagonal peaks, they are nothing but the cross peaks. They are correlations between coupled spins in a spin system in cozy. So here, you're on the diagonal line, if you observe, there are 5 green spots, isn't it? On the diagonal line, there are 5 green spots. That means there are 5 different protons. And for each one, if you consider, if you start from the bottom one, it is connected to only one other one. There is a cross peak connecting only from this to another one, immediate one. Okay. Only one box you can draw. So that is the corners show the cross peaks. Next, if you consider the second one, B, okay, it has got connectivity to another one, that is C. Okay. So again, you can draw a box. But this center one, B, is now having 2 boxes, isn't it? It is connected to A on one side, it is connected to C on the other side. So because these happen to be in between, this is cozy. But when you come to toxy, okay, if you come to toxy, you see, observe, for each spin system, you're finding how many total, how many are there? 4 are there, 5 are there, no? 5 protons. So 5 spin systems are there. So you have n minus 1. If there are n spin systems, you will have n minus 1 cross peaks. So for for the bottom, you'll have to find how many cross peaks? 4, because there are 5 spin systems. So you just count the corners, so the boxes for this, and the corners cross peaks you can consider. First one is red. For the green, the top one is in the box, the corner, red one, then blue, blue, blue. So how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 you're finding, isn't it? Similarly, on the diagonal line, come to the next green dot. Okay. How many are you finding? 3 on the top, red, 1 below. So 4, isn't it? Next, another green spot on the diagonal line, 2 on the top, 2 on the 2 below. So 4. So similarly, you can find all of them. For the next one, 1 above and 3 below. And the last one, all the 4 below. So you're finding cross peaks, n minus 1 cross peaks in a spin system. That means total correlations you're going to find in the molecule. This is nothing but toxic, total correlation spectroscopy. So total correlation spectroscopy is with reference to only, we are talking about only homocozy. So now here, example is given, cozy versus toxy for this molecule. This is 3-heptanone. So 3-heptanone, cozy versus toxy, how the cozy looks and how the toxy looks. Here, in fact, students, you have to understand one thing. Here, the cozy, whether it is a cozy spectrum or a toxy spectrum, the boxes are not drawn. In fact, we'll have to draw the boxes. We'll have to identify the cross peaks and draw the boxes. For your convenience, for your understanding, I have just drawn and shown. But the actual spectrum doesn't show any cross peaks, doesn't show any boxes. Only thing is, on the diagonal line, you find diagonal peaks, and above and below the diagonal line, symmetrically placed, you find off diagonal peaks, which are called as cross peaks, and you will have to identify which are cross peaks. So how to identify the cross peaks? They are placed symmetrically above and below the diagonal line. And if at all you want to identify that as a cross peak, when you draw a line starting from the cross peak above or below the diagonal line, you can draw a horizontal starting from that horizontal line and a vertical line. Okay, similarly, on the opposite side, another spot, you can draw a horizontal and a vertical line. And these 2 lines, they meet at 2 points on the diagonal line. So the points where they meet are the coupled nuclei. That's how we can identify that they are the cross peaks. So that's how we can draw the boxes. So if you complete this diagram, you will understand. So if you just look at this, it looks very complicated. So if you just the same thing, if you just take the photograph and then if you try sit at home and then you try to draw, you will find all the connectivities. Okay. So here I'll explain one. I'll not go into the details. I'll just try to explain one thing. So there are 2 spin systems in this molecule. In this molecule 3-heptanone, there are 2 spin systems. That is one ethyl is on one side. To the left, you have ethyl spin system, CH2, CH3. On to the right of carbonyl, you have a 1, 2, 3, 4 butyl spin system. So you have on to the right 4 spins, 3, 4, 5, 6. On to the left, you have only 2 spin systems, 2 and 1. So even in TOXI, okay, the carbonyl is interrupting the ethyl spin system from that of the butyl spin system. So ethyl will not interact with butyl and butyl will not interact with ethyl. But among the butyl 3, 4, 5, 6, normal COSY will show only the connectivities between 3, 4. Okay. 3 will have only one connectivity to 4, and 4 will have connectivity to 5 also along with 3, and 5 will have connectivity to 4 as well as to 6, and 6 will have connectivity only to 5. But in TOXI, 3 will have three connectivities, 1 to 4, another to 5, and another to 6. Similarly, 4 will have connectivity to 3, 5, and 6, and so on. This is what is TOXI. And next we'll come to inverse techniques, inverse detection techniques. What are these inverse detection techniques? As the name itself indicates, it is inverse, something which is opposite of inverse, okay, opposite of the normal detection techniques. And this is with reference to the heterocosy. This term is applicable only to the heterocosy, because in homocosy both the axes are same, x and y are both same, delta only. So the question of interchange of axis comes only with reference to heterocosy. So 2D inverse techniques also, detection techniques also with reference to heterocosy. So that is especially with reference to heterocosy or head core spectrum. So the importance of this particular technique is, as we said, always the conventional axis is when FT is done over T2. Okay, when FT is done over T2, the conventional, the information pertaining to conventional axis is seen on the x-axis. So when you look at the head core spectrum, the x-axis is C13 delta values, y-axis is proton delta values. And when you see the C13 spectrum is shown in the form of singlets, and the proton NMR spectrum is shown in the form of multiplicity. So where is the resolution required for us? The resolution is more required for the proton rather than for the C13. And proton nucleus is called as a sensitive nucleus, and C13 nucleus is called as an insensitive nucleus. The reason is proton magnetic, the abundance of proton nucleus is more compared to C13. And not only that, the gyromagnetic ratio of proton is much, much higher compared to C13. So C13 gyromagnetic ratio is 1/4 that of proton. So hence the sensitivity of proton is more compared to C13, and it is very easy to detect such a sensitive nucleus compared to insensitive nucleus. So for all practical purposes, we call proton as a sensitive nucleus and C13 as an insensitive nucleus. The reason is this. Hence, the signals due to insensitive nucleus are also seen with very less intensity, which is very difficult for us to detect. So that is the reason why we have adopted many techniques to detect C13 NMR, whereas we didn't talk about so many techniques when we talked about proton NMR, that being very sensitive. So it means we can easily detect the signal is seen with more intensity. So here the x-axis is conventional NMR, C13 NMR, which is insensitive nucleus, where in fact the resolution is not much required. And the resolution which is required more is going on to the y-axis. And in 2D inverse techniques, what we are doing is we are trying to highlight or emphasize on the more sensitive nucleus. So it is aimed at, this particular technique is aimed at sensitive nucleus, so that that information is brought onto the x-axis, and the information which was seen on the x-axis is now moved to the y-axis. That means we are reversing, we are inversing the axis. Hence these techniques are called as inverse, and the information what you're going to get from the inverse techniques is more reliable and more useful compared to the ordinary techniques what we have seen so far, that is head core. But since head core is developed in the beginning, initially, we are calling, which are developed later, these techniques later, we are calling these as inverse. If suppose these techniques are developed before only, we could have called head core as an inverse technique. Okay. So this provides the same information as that of head core, and it gives a better resolution. Okay. So x-axis here is proton and y-axis is C13. But in head core, it is X is C13, Y is proton. And again, inverse techniques, there are two types, HMQC and HMBC. But HMQC will talk in more detail because that is more important. HMQC is exactly the same as that of head core. It is one bond C13 proton coupling. Direct coupling we're going to see. See on the left side in the slide I'm showing C13 proton directly bonded, carbon proton directly bonded interactions. Whereas HMBC is a heteronuclear multiple bond coherence. The proton is the interaction between the proton and the carbon, which is not one bond away. It is indirect coupling. So it is long range coupling. So it is 2, 3 or 4. 2 to 4. Normally 2 and 3. Sometimes you can even observe 4 bond coupling also information. But one bond coupling interaction is not shown. Only 2 and 2, 3 beyond that. Maximum 4. Sometimes 4 is seen or sometimes not seen, but mostly it is 2 and 3. Whereas in HMQC, it is only one bond, that is short range, direct coupling. So HMQC is exactly as that of head core. Only thing is the axis is interchanged. So now I just have given I have just comparison study I'm doing it so that it will be more clear. I have taken example 1-nitropropane. Onto the left it is HMQC, onto the right it is head core. So head core is C13 on the conventional axis, that is x-axis. Proton is on the y-axis, and to the left side it is showing the HMQC. So x-axis, see here, x-axis is proton NMR. On the top I'm showing proton, isn't it? So to the right it is C13 NMR. So the points are given. See HMQC, it is aimed at enhancing signal due to sensitive nucleus, whereas head core is aimed at enhancing signal due to insensitive nucleus, which is in fact not required. Okay, and then initial pulse and detection occur in the sensitive channel, while the evolution period is detected in the insensitive channel and HMQC, whereas initial pulse and detection occur in the insensitive channel, while the evolution period is detected in the proton channel with reference to head core. So the same thing, the appearance, the matrix, if you consider the matrix inside the box of both the HMQC and head core, it remains the same. Only thing is Y and X are interchanging. So it is HMQC is nothing but the same as that of head core. Only thing is a inverse technique.
Excuse
Now
me.
the more important, yes.
Madam, don't mind, madam. Please conclude as early as possible. Please conclude as early as possible.
Conclude as early as possible. Inka half an hour time ఉంది కదా.
Yes, madam. 4:30 it will be closed, madam.
4:30 it will be closed. So I'll just quickly that you could have informed me before so that I could have concluded.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, anyway, so let us come to the nuclear overhazard enhancement spectroscopy. This is nothing but as I said, it is still now we have talked about true bond connectivity information in the NMR spectrum. Whatever techniques we have discussed so far are true bond connectivity. They're showing only the true bond connectivity, and now we are going to talk about the spatial interaction, spatial connectivity. So even though the protons or the nuclei which are far apart as far as the number of bonds are concerned, if suppose based on their structures, based on this geometry, if the two protons they come closer, their connectivity can be known through this particular technique, and that technique we are calling with reference to 2D is called NOESY. 1D is NOE technique. The same thing is in 2D it is called as NOESY. So on to the bottom of the slide, there is a small picture which is shown. See HA and HB. The number of bonds connecting these two, HA and HB, below, there are many. It is not specified, but the number of bonds connecting them is more than 3 or 4. And beyond 3 or 4 bonds in a saturated system, the coupling is not observed. But if suppose these two protons, they come spatially closer or proximal based on the geometry of the molecule, then the connectivity is shown in the form of a spectrum. That is nothing but a NOESY spectrum, provided these two protons are falling within the range that is less than 5 angstroms apart. If the two nuclei are falling below 5 angstroms, then you can observe the connectivity. And how is the connectivity shown? Again, whenever you talk about the connectivity, that connectivity is shown in the form of cross peaks. And here, the connectivity, spatial connectivity doesn't mean coupling interaction. Coupling interaction we observe only when there is a through bond connectivity and up to 3 in saturated systems. Beyond 3, it is difficult. If you have an unsaturated system like allylic coupling, you can see even up to 4 and sometimes 5 homoallylic coupling, but it will be very less. But the same thing through space connectivity, it is shown in the form of cross peaks. Okay. So this is a NOESY spectrum, the pulse sequence. I'll just move on. The appearance of the NOESY spectrum is similar to the appearance of the COSY spectrum. So you have blue spots on the diagonal line. They are the they are the chemical Schiff values of the protons, and the red spots on the off the diagonal, they are the cross peaks. And the cross peaks in NOESY, they represent the connectivity between the spatial protons, spatially proximal protons. That is the only difference between NOESY and COSY. And here NOESY is with reference to, here we are referring to NOESY. The NOESY is with reference to proton NMR, so spatial proximity. So this is, we can say that NOESY technique is very useful. It is a stereochemical tool. It is useful in the stereochemistry, finding out the stereochemistry of the molecules whenever you have a structural ambiguity, whether the molecule is cis-fused or transfused, or whether the molecule, the geometry of the molecule, whether it is linear or folded, and so on, we can know through this NOESY technique. So I'll just talk about this particular bicyclic lactone, which is cis-fused. So the cis-fusion, the protons which are labeled here, 9 proton and 8 proton. See the final 9 proton is, if suppose the two rings are cis-fused, how do we know that these two rings are cis-fused but not transfused? Based on the NOESY, if suppose it is cis-fused, 9 proton comes close to 8 proton. So that connectivity is shown in the matrix in the form of brown line. So the bottommost signal is H9, which is having a connectivity on one hand to 8A proton, that is 2.32. This is 5.3, 5 point something, about 5.38, the 9 proton, which is having a connectivity. See, the diagram is showing connectivity to the 8A proton. So only when these two rings are cis-fused, 9 and 8A proton come closer spatially. And how do we know that? Through cross-peak. Whenever you find a cross-peak between these two protons, then we can say this ring is cis-fused, not trans. And that is shown in the form of a cross-peak. Similarly, it will have a connectivity to 1 proton also. So 1 proton is 4.17, another connectivity. And similarly, another evidence for the cis-fusion is between the connectivity between 1 and 5 prime protons, which are represented in the form of green protons and green lines, the connectivity. So those two also say that the ring is, the lactone is cis-fused. The bicyclic lactone is cis-fused. Okay. So the cis-fusion or the transfusion, the geometry of the molecule can be known through this. Next is, this is also very useful in studying the protein structures in biology, especially protein. You all know that the protein secondary and tertiary structure, the secondary structure is alpha helical structure and then beta pleated structure. You can know through this NOESY, not only the X-ray crystallography, but even the NOESY technique tells us about the alpha helical structure. How? See, for example, the alpha helical structure of the proteins is stabilized due to the internal hydrogen bonding between the carbonyl oxygen of one amino acid and another fourth amino acid. Okay, the NH proton of another amino acid around, I think, fourth amino acid. So the blue lines which are showing, they're hydrogen bonding. So the molecule is stable because the molecule is the protein molecule is able to take up this shape due to the hydrogen bonding, which is acquiring either the alpha helical structure or beta helical structure. And how do we know? Through the NOESY techniques? So what happens is the molecule comes compact instead of forming a linear chain. So proteins are nothing but it's a combination of peptides, polypeptide, isn't it? Instead of a linear chain, when it is folding, due to this folding, how it is able to form a fold, how it is able to fold because of the internal hydrogen bonding. And due to this, what happens is the protons which are present in one amino acid residue and another amino acid residue, which are far away if it is in the linear shape, they come closer. And how do we identify that? Through NOESY. If they come closer, you have to find a cross peak in the NOESY spectrum. And if at all, when you take the NOESY spectrum of protein structure, if you find a cross peak, then you can say that yes, the molecule is not linear, it is taking up this particular shape. And why it is taking this particular shape is based on the stability, internal hydrogen bonding. Okay, so all these are interlinked, and by this you can say that NOESY, with the help of NOESY also, we can know the structure of the proteins, okay, secondary structure, the alpha helical structure. So here, this is a clear representation, diagrammatically very clear, simple, lucid, instead of considering protein complicated chain. So here I've given all blue, red, green beads, isn't it? They are the, let us consider they are the residues, they are the protons, different kinds of protons. If the molecule on the top, it is linear, they are far away, isn't it? If it is folded, what happens? The green are coming together, red are coming together, blue are coming together. The number of bonds are same. They're not changing. The number of bonds connecting them is different, more. But by folding, by folded shape or by the conformation, by the geometry, they are coming closer. And how do we identify through nosy? Through cross peaks. If you find a cross peak, then we can say the molecule is not linear. If suppose the molecule is linear, you don't find any cross peak between red red, green green, and blue blue. But if you find cross peak between red red, green green, then you can say that the molecule is not no more linear, it is folded. That's how you can extend this to other different molecules and then assign the geometry, conformation, configuration, the stereochemistry. So the stereochemical ambiguity can be ruled out with the help of this. I think I can just take 5 more minutes and then I'll stop. And the last and powerful, the most powerful technique is inadequate, 2D inadequate. And this is always taught at the end. The reason is if you consider all these techniques, the 2D NMR techniques as the tools. So tools means they are like instruments to analyze the structures of the molecules. To analyze here the structures of molecules means what? These techniques we are using not simple techniques, isn't it? We are using advanced techniques. 2D and MR are more powerful advanced techniques. So we don't consider them just as techniques. We're going to consider these tools are the techniques as weapons. So when do we use weapons in the war field, isn't it? So when we are trying to use these techniques as weapons in the war field, trying to win over the opposite team. Similarly here, what is the opposite team? The complex molecule, not simple molecule. We are not using these techniques to know the structures of simple molecules. We are using these techniques to know the structures of complex molecules. And if we consider all these techniques as weapons, the ultimate weapon what we are going to use is what? We are not going to use a most powerful technique initially only, isn't it? Do we? And according to Hindu mythology, which is the most powerful weapon? Brahmastra. So we are going to use Brahmastra only at the end when we are feeling that we don't have whatever weapons what we have used so far are of no use. Then we use the ultimate weapon which is in reserve, and then we are going to put that to fight the opposite team, isn't it? Similarly here, this particular technique is called the most ultimate powerful weapon, that is called 2D inadequate. Why is it so? The reason is this shows the connectivity between carbon. And to know the connectivity between two carbons, it is not that easy because carbon itself, the most abundant isotope of carbon, that is C12, is non-magnetic. It is not magnetic. And whenever you want to take the NMR spectrum of any nucleus, that has to be magnetic. And the most abundant isotope of carbon is non-magnetic, that is C12. And C13 is the magnetic isotope, and for which we can record the NMR. And that is very less abundant with reference to C12, that is 1 in 100 molecules. So if you take 100 molecules of methane, only 1 in 100 molecules of methane will be present as C13. The rest 99 molecules will be present as C12. That is the reason why we say that carbon is insensitive compared to proton. Whereas proton, if you consider the isotopes of hydrogen, proton is the most abundant isotope, natural isotope, which is magnetic. That is the reason why we call it as a sensitive, and we can record it very easily. And C13 is difficult. It is less sensitive or insensitive nucleus. And this particular inadequate is nothing but we are trying to find the connectivity between two carbons. And if you want to find the connectivity between the two carbons, both of them have to be present as C13. If one carbon, if you want to find it as C13, the probability is 1 in 100. And if you want to find two carbons connectivity, the probability is 1 in 100 and 1 in 100. So it is nothing but 1 in 10,000. That is 10 power minus 4. The probability is becoming less. So the probability is becoming less. And if you even then we are detecting means what? We are such a low sensitive, incredibly low sensitive also we are trying to detect. Hence, it is a most powerful technique, and the information what you're going to get is very useful. And this is useful in cases where, as we have seen in 3 heptanone, carbonyl is interrupting ethyl fragment and butyl fragment, we said. So that carbonyl we are calling it as spectroscopically silent. Why we are calling it as spectroscopically silent? Because it is stopping the spin system, one spin system from another spin system. It is stopping when you are interrupting by a quaternary. It is not having any attached proton. So even such spectroscopically silent regions are present also. This is of use, and we can know the connectivity between different carbons, and that is the advantage of 2D inadequate. Hence we can say that this is a most powerful technique, and this is a pulse sequence. And the advantage is that, and how do we record this, the connectivity? I have taken a very simple example, 2D inadequate cubitanol spectrum. So the bottom is showing the bottom, the C13 NMR, conventional NMR, and the top one is the matrix form is showing the 2D inadequate. So this is, it is just the connectivity between carbon. So you have an imaginary diagonal line. I have drawn the diagonal line, but it is imaginary. So how the connectivity is shown? It is connectivity, pair of doublets are present equidistant from the diagonal line. For example, you have cubitanol. So the downmost signal is second carbon, next is third carbon, next is one carbon, next is four carbon. Now, if you consider the second carbon, it has got connectivity to one carbon on one side and the third carbon on the other side. So that means it has to have two connectivities. So the number of connectivities in the spectrum is each connectivity. See, the information is given onto the right side. Each connectivity is shown by a pair of doublets parallel to the horizontal axis, which are lying onto the either side of the diagonal line. Okay, and each doublet lies on the chemical shift of each connected carbon 13 atom. So, for example, we are talking about second carbon. How many connectivities that this particular carbon should have? It should have two connectivities, isn't it? One connectivity to the first carbon, another connectivity to the third carbon. So, if you just consider the second carbon, you are finding two doublets, isn't it? One doublet below and the other doublet below. Both are lying on the same vertical line because that should read the same chemical shift value on the x-axis. And now the first connectivity we'll just look. Second carbon is connected to the third carbon. So the third carbon, the connectivity. So this doublet and that doublet, they are equidistant from the diagonal line. Next, the second carbon is also having connectivity to the first carbon. See, first carbon, there is another pair of doublet, and that is equidistant to this pair of doublet from the diagonal line. And fourth carbon, let us consider fourth carbon. Fourth carbon, it has got only one connectivity. It has got connectivity to only the third carbon. So fourth carbon on the top we are showing. So okay, so it is having connectivity to the third carbon. A pair of doublet corresponding to the fourth carbon and a pair of doublet corresponding to the third carbon, third signal. Because it, and only one connectivity. For fourth carbon, you are finding only one connectivity in the vertical line, whereas for the second carbon, you are finding two connectivities. And similarly, you have to have two connectivities for the third carbon, because third is connected to 2 and 4. Okay, whereas 1 and 4, they have only one connectivity because they are terminal ones. So this is the advantage of 2D inadequate spectrum. So with this, I am concluding, and the students, those who have any doubts, they can ask me. Okay, it is 4:20. Ramohan? Hello?
Madam.
Hello?
Madam.
అయిపోయింది. My job is done.